Duncan Harris, and I'm currently the Dean of Student Affairs here at MCC.
Okay. And how many years have you been at the college?
I've been at the college. I started March 1996, so 16 years this past March.
What was your first contact with MCC? Was it a job ad or a...
Yeah, it's interesting. I came to the college. I was working at the University of Connecticut at the time, and I was at UConn, and I had a one-year contract working in their Student Support Services office. And it was interesting because Cyrus Williams, who used to work at MCC, went to UConn, and so to work in that same office. And while I was there, like I said, it was, I was, doing a good job and working with Cyrus. And he said, hey, by the way, but it was a grant. And so he said, by the way, I left MCC, and I happened to know that the job I used to have as a test administrator is vacant. And at that point, I did a little bit of research, and the posting was up, and I applied for the position as a test administrator. And the rest is history. But but that was a neat kind of happenstance that I ended up here.
Do you remember the interview process? Was it a search committee?
It was a search committee, and the committee was chaired by Von Seal Wright. The position was working in the College Learning Center under Dr. Elena Devon, but I do recall that Von Seal was chairing the test administrator committee, and that was my first community colleges. That's been the family business. My father is a community college administrator, but I had never worked at one before. I remember when I was a kid, my father was the president of Essex County Community College in Newark, and so it was interesting because when I was my son's age, who's now 7. And it's funny because I'll bring him on campus all the time, and then I kind of think back, to the 80s when my dad would bring me on his campus in the 70s and 80s. So it's kind of neat. So this is the family business for us.
So your dad must be very proud of the...
Yeah, it's interesting because I grew up on college campuses, but I never thought about that as a profession. And what happened was I was working for Merrill Lynch. I went to UConn, majored in econ, and then I thought that I wanted to go work on Wall Street. And so I was working in corporate America for about 3 or 4 years after college, and was doing some mentoring work with students. And I kind of had an epiphany, and I decided that I wanted to do something different, and then I got into the higher ed business.
When you came here in '96, who were some of the people who were important to you or stand out?
Interesting. I kind of, I think, learned the business under, as I mentioned, Dr. Elena Devon. So she was the director of the College Learning Center at the time, and my supervisor. And I think back, Elena was probably the consummate professional. Everything had to be on a memo. We follow the protocol and policy. And I think that it was really it was good to kind of come in under her leadership, because I think I'm yielding dividends now in terms of my understanding of being a professional in student affairs and a community college professional. So I learned from her, and I consider her kind of the best. A couple other people, Von Seal, early in my career, she supported me while I was working on my master's degree and my doctorate. And so, there were occasions where she was very supportive and encouraging in terms of getting those things done. When I first started, I didn't have my master's, and then I moved into counseling in a couple other areas. Think about Alfred Carter, kind of as a young male entering the profession. I think that he was kind of a role model. A lot of times he might not know I was watching him, but I'd be watching him the way he would, carry himself in his presentations. He's a phenomenal orator. I used to love listening to his speeches at new student orientation and things like that. He's certainly capable of motivating people. And so those are some of the people that stick out, early on in my career.
And so you came in as a test administrator, and then what was the next step up?
Yeah, I started as the test administrator, and I did that job, I want to say, from 96 to maybe 2000. And like I said, I was in college. I was doing my master's at Central, so I was working on a degree in student development and higher ed, a counseling degree. And at the time, right around the time that I was finishing my degree, one of the counselors left the counseling center. And so a position opened up, and I applied for it and was a successful candidate. So I moved over into counseling around 2000, 2001. And I was doing that and assisting in college with coordinating academic advising and counseling. So I was there for about 5 years. And it's interesting because, 16 years later, and I'd imagine this may hold true for a lot of folks, is that, I didn't anticipate staying that long. I was 25 at the time, et cetera, and I'll stay there 3-4 years. But it's been a great place to work. It's very this familial kind of oriented kind of place, and so I went over to counseling for 5 years, from 01 to 06. Yeah.
And then after counseling?
Yeah. So then after counseling, it was interesting. So that's 10 years in student affairs. And at the time, Dean Al Savage was the academic dean, and there was a posting for the associate dean of academic affairs. And, I was in the midst of working on my doctorate, so I was, studying leadership theory and all these other things. And I applied for that position. It was interesting when you look at it, I said, all right, well, typically that might have been somebody who would have come up through the faculty ranks. But when I looked at the job description and what it entailed in terms of working with curriculum and working with adjuncts and working with this kind of collaborative kind of thing that they were expecting, I had the background, and I ended up being a successful candidate for Associate Dean for Academic Affairs. And I did that for 3 years. So I was a member of the cabinet, learned a lot. That was under President Dobby at the time. And so I was working with the managers during that period. And so that was a neat experience. So I did that for 3 years. And then currently I moved into the Dean of Student Affairs about 3 years ago.
Now, you also teach a public speaking course every semester.
Yeah.
Does the classroom contact with students help you in your administrative position?
Interesting, yeah. I happen to work in the communications department, teaching the public speaking class. And, it's been phenomenal, probably for about 7 or 8 years. This guy, Bob Kagan, I don't know what he was thinking, but he gave me a shot to teach that class some 7-8 years ago. But I love it. I mean, I think it helps me be a better dean of student affairs. It gives me a perspective on what our faculty, what some of their challenges are, and at the same time what at times motivates them. Mm-hmm. So I keep a foot in the classroom. I don't think there's, like I said, each semester I teach at least one class. I've started teaching the first year experience class too, and I enjoy that. So now I think, and then the other piece is, as Dean of Student Affairs, I encourage my staff now to teach. I think you really get the full picture, and there's no better way to learn about our students than to kind of have them in class and then have them in another venue too. So I love teaching here at the college.
When you look back over the last 16 years, can you pick out some situations, some highlights?
It's interesting. I think, and I'll call it a movement, but I'd say that 2020 movement, it was interesting because it really, when there's discussion sessions, I think about some of the turmoil, and I think that's appropriate as we were kind of going through it. But where we are now, as a result of getting some of those things out in the open and addressing them head on, I think that it's a healthier institution. I think that the spirit of collaboration is in a very different place as a result of going through that and where we are now with regard to the shared leadership, understanding, and responsibility is kind of a byproduct of some of those kind of courageous conversations we were having during the 2020. It's interesting that some of those meetings were pretty heated, but I think that, we got it out. I think that we're in a very different place. And it's interesting because, our President Glickman came in kind of at the tail end of us really working through some of those challenges during the 2020 stuff. And I think that she was able to kind of leverage that to kind of put the college in the place where it is now. And this is her 4th year. But I think that she benefited from us going through that at the onset of her tenure as president, and that she's been really able to kind of leverage that to kind of so that we're where we are now. I think about that. I think that there was another period in kind of recent history that was kind of tough, which was when we were, in terms of the budget cuts that we went through last year. And I think that that was a tough period, in terms of people who have, given kind of blood, sweat, and tears, for this place, but some of the tough decisions that had to be made with regard to the budget. But I think that we kind of made it through, and I think that we're, positioned now that the kind of, it was part of our history. It's nice to be talking about it and not necessarily be having to live through it at this point. Folks we were able to maintain the positions and things like that. But that was a tough time, I think, for us as an institution.
Can you think of any individual students over the last 15 years or so who you feel you've worked with and made a difference?
Yeah.
Not mentioning names, but
yeah, and without mentioning names, and I'll maybe just give the first name, which is Mike. We've got a million Mikes, so that doesn't necessarily indicate which Mike. But I have a student who when I was first started here, I was working in the College Learning Center, and came in and was in the College Learning Center utilizing the tutoring in the lab. Just kind of popped into my office, kid, baggy jeans, hat to the back, Timberland boots on, this and that. And he came in and just kind of plopped down and started talking to me about, doing well here, and his idea that he had a desire to do well here. And I said, all right, well, if you're serious, I'll work with you. And so he did, and so he would come in, he'd check in periodically. I'd nag him a little bit about how he was doing in his classes. I'd check on his transcript. He got to the point he started asking me questions about, my college career and family and all these other things. And so he did exceptionally well. At a certain point, it's interesting because I would start seeing him in the library. A lot of times I would come in and I'd have some work to do on the weekend. I'd see him in the library studying and things like that. And he graduated a few years ago and transferred to the University of Hartford. He did exceptionally well at UHart, got a job working for UTC as a corporate strategist. And then maybe about 2 years ago, he shared with me that he was interested in going to a very competitive program for an MBA. And this past year, last fall, he did his GMATs, got a great score on GMATs, and now and then was admitted to Dartmouth to their Tuck school. And as a matter of fact, and so we would stay in touch and we'd go out. And I just got a text from him this week that he's starting his internship in New York working for Morgan Stanley. So kind of came in, did well, was motivated, or got motivated, and, went on and is doing phenomenal things and stays connected. So a lot of times I've asked him to come back and talk to other students. He spoke at the Great Pass graduation last year, and he's spoken at orientation for us before. But, it's good work when you see the product in that way.
What changes have you seen in the college, or how has the college changed since 1996?
Since 96? I'd say that it's been flattened. And what I mean by that is in terms of the decisions and how they're made. I think that's made us a more innovative and dynamic organization that's more nimble. And I'd say that when I first started, sometimes for a decision to be made, it might have to go through 3 or 4 kind of different layers. And I think what's happening now is that we're at a point where we've created this different kind of organization and structure where, the people that are actually making the decisions, and that they're all in the room at the same time, rather than 4 different meetings. And so, so in terms of over time, I'd say that's a pretty dramatic change. I think the ability to say yes has been pushed down, in terms of some of the authority that in the past resided only at the highest levels. Now that individuals feel more comfortable and capable of making decisions, and I think that's definitely a positive thing. I think that we have a lot of, at one point we were I'd say the kind of the best kept secret, but I think that in recent years that what we do and the good work that we do here is kind of known now, I think, in a different kind of way. So.
Okay. Do you have a vision for where you would like to see the college go in the next 10 or 15 years?
Vision? I think I like the idea of us being aware of what's going on in the national stage, right? And so I think that when you think about vanguard community colleges nationwide and what causes them to be vanguard or have that distinction, I'd like to see us, I think we're doing some of those things already, but I think I'd like to see us really look at that, whether that's our graduation rates, whether that's the quality of our transfer programs and how our students do wherever they end up. And I think that we have the pieces in place, but I think that I'd like to see us really be aware of and market some of the good things that we're doing. I could see us, and even as a result of fortifying in a different kind of way the relationships with our senior institutions in a different kind of way. I think we're positioned. I think we're doing really good things here, and I'm excited about what the future will bring for us.
If you were talking to someone who was just hired to work at the college and you were giving them some advice, what would you tell that person?
Advice for the newbie, huh? I'd encourage them to spend more time at the onset anyway, listening rather than talking. I think that there's a wealth of knowledge and experience that appeal to this place, and just a great place to contribute and to in terms of how you spend your time in the vineyard. This is that type of place, and that you see the results of the hard work of a lot of people. I'm glad that we're doing this history of the college. I think that this place will be here, but it didn't get to be the way that it is without a lot of the hard work and a lot of people carrying a lot of water and rolling their sleeves up to get the work done and to build a phenomenal place to serve students and for other people to work at. So.
That's great.
That's good. All right, great.